Very, very happy to be here. Many friends over the years, and as you probably know, I'm sure you know everything. I'm about to go over the side for the last time. I retire at the end of this month. Change of command down in Southcom is next Thursday. I would tell you that the Southcom, very, very unique organization, a remarkable organization, very different than the other COCOMs, very different mission. It's all about broadening and deepening partnerships down there, to say the least. And I would tell you the partners we have in Latin America, the Caribbean, like the United States, want to be associated with the United States. There's a few down there that didn't get the memo about democracy and human rights and that kind of thing. But some of that is even turning around. But they really do like us and associate with us. And they very much like, and I'm very proud of this, the fact that Southern Command doesn't lecture them, preach to them, point their finger at them, but we work with them. And we deliver an awful lot of good advice, good education, good assistance. The other thing we do a lot of is an interagency partner. We interdict drugs in a big way. We've had a tremendous year of interdiction cocaine with what amounts to be no U.S. military assets to speak of. The way we've partnered with various nations has allowed us to interdict over nearly 200 tons, 191 metric tons of cocaine, and that's after it left Latin America. And of course, our number one partner in all of this, in a country we have a very, very special relationship with, remarkable people, remarkable military, is Colombia. They themselves interdicted a couple of hundred metric tons of cocaine on the way to the United States before it ever left their country. They eradicated tens of thousands of coca plantation bushes and certainly hundreds and hundreds of coca labs, cocaine labs that are destroyed every year. Other great partners, of course, are in this effort, the Panamanians, the Peruvians. As you go up the isthmus, the difficulty of interdicting drugs once it's ashore and the corruption it brings and the violence it brings has really devastated some of our really good partners, Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala. In all of their problems, to a large degree, their problems are associated directly with our drug consumption in the United States, and you all know what it does to Mexico. But there's good news throughout most of the region. And as I say, as I get ready to hang it up here, it's been when I left here, the Pentagon, I was given some options, and I was kind of tired of the war. I'd spent so much of my time in the early part of the 2000s. And I thought Southern Command would be a place that would allow me to unleash other energies and talents, and it certainly has allowed me to do that. And then, of course, you may or may not know this, and it may be an issue or not, I don't know, but I run Guantanamo Bay. I run Guantanamo Bay directly for the President of the United States through the Secretary of Defense. I do not do policy, whether it opens or closes, whether it ever should have opened. I do detention ops. And my mandate from the President through the Secretary of Defense is to make sure that we're in accordance with all laws, regulations, that the detainees, as long as they're down there, are treated well, treated humanely, well taken care of, medically and otherwise. And we do that, and we do that superbly. And I'm very, very, very proud of my soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines that are at Guantanamo that execute this mission as well as they do. So I'll end there and open it up. Leah.
General Kelly, thanks for doing this. We don't see enough of your COCOM colleagues at the podium. Two questions. One on Gitmo. Later this month, we're told that we can expect a large number of detainees will likely be transferred out, more than a dozen. And I'm wondering if the recent releases, which have been in some chunks lately, give credence to the argument that the military had been dragging its feet over previous years, and whether this amounts to sort of a sudden new effort that could have actually happened earlier. And then just a second question, just because you mentioned some of the interdiction that you've been doing with little U.S. military assets. There was a lot of discussion about additional drones, Army drones and other drones that could be used. Has Southcom seen any increase at all in the amount of UAV assets and other help for the drug war, and is that still an unmet need?
Let's start off with the drug question. Again, the partnership issue can't be overstated down there, particularly when we don't have U.S. military assets sufficient U.S. military assets. In that, I count the United States Coast Guard. We have some cutters. We have partners like Canada that frequently provide a ship. The Dutch will frequently, and these are not warships. These tend to be Coast Guard type ship buoy tenders. The French occasionally in UK. In fact, I think 70% of our take last year, that 191 metric tons, would not have happened had it not been for our partners. And again, I don't count Colombia in this because they do so much before the product ever leaves their country. We can see the joint interagency task force in Key West, and if you have not been down there, you really need to go down there. It's probably the best tactical fusion center in the world, and I think SOCOM and CIA and a lot of people would say the same thing. It brings the entire power of the U.S. government into one place to get after drugs as they flow up through Latin America or Caribbean. And the beauty is it's a long way from Washington, and as I think you'd all agree, at least it's been my experience, the further you get away from Washington, the better things work. People actually talk to each other. People actually socialize with each other. They work together. There's no rice bowls. So we can see, and when I say our partners, CIA, FBI, DEA, Homeland Security, it's a phenomenal organization. And so we can see the drugs. Much of our human intelligence comes from law enforcement sources. So you have DEA agents, FBI agents working with partner countries, whether it's Bogota, Lima, Tegucigalpa, Honduras, and they're shoulder to shoulder with men and women of those countries' drug, equivalents, if you will. There's no equivalent to our drug enforcement, to our law enforcement people in the world. So, but the rough equivalent, and that's where much of our human intelligence comes from. And I sometimes, not unusually, know plus or minus an hour or two when a ton of cocaine is going to leave a given port and head north. I might know the guy's first name. I might have his phone number. That's the human intelligence. And then when we pick them up, most of the ISR, we pick them up with our P-3 aircraft, flying out of various locations down there, sometimes Navy, oftentimes Homeland Security, and I cannot say enough good things about really my number one partner, and that is Homeland Security and Jay Johnson. So we can see it move. What I can't do is interdict it because I don't have, and it's very simple. All I need is a helicopter. Once we locate the movement of the ton, 2 tons, 5 tons, helicopter shows up, they know what's coming, they throw their electronics over the side and they wait to be picked up. And then we take, it's a law enforcement effort, remember, and we take the driver of the boat and then he goes into our typically into the federal legal justice system, and that completes the cycle of human intelligence. So I don't get much ISR, but I don't need an awful lot more. Now, drones would be nice because they can stay up forever and don't get tired, and they're less expensive to operate. But no, we have not seen anything, any increases, certainly no drones. A lot of the countries down there want to acquire drones, and we encourage them to do so, but the right kind of drones. They don't need, they don't need the high-end drones. They don't need armed drones. They just need reconnaissance drones. So we encourage them to do that. But again, they buy most of that kind of equipment from somewhere other than the United States because it is very hard to deal with the United States in terms of purchasing things for a lot of different reasons. So they tend to try and then default to Israel or Russia, maybe China. So I don't know if that answers the question on the drug side. On the Gitmo side, I can speak personally for the last 3 years, because that's how long I've been there, 38 months. The resident memory, though, of Gitmo is at Guantanamo Bay. My staff, my detainee staff down there can talk with a lot of historical authority back to about 2006, and then less so before that just because of turnover. I can talk to my time. The fact that there was reporting about this building, secretaries of defense, people in uniform, people in detention ops, in any way, shape, or form, slowing down to try to impede the release of detainees, from my perspective, is complete nonsense. It's an insult, frankly, to a serving military officer or a civil servant in this building to be accused of whether we agree or disagree with any of the policies, that we would in any way impede the progress. The president wants to close it. I have a role not in closing it. I have a role in detention ops. My only role in transfers is give me a name, give me a country, give me a time frame, and I will get the person to that country. That's my role in detention ops. We facilitate the movement of foreign delegations if they want to come down. We never, ever, 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 ever do anything but facilitate their immediate movement when they want to come to Guantanamo Bay. Typically, the process is, if a delegation wants to come, or even if they don't want to come, when there's a transfer, a country interested in a transfer, they are provided a summary, pretty detailed summary of the medical condition of the individual. And if they do come to Guantanamo, sometimes they will come with questions because they've been given an advance copy of that medical thing. And not all transfers associated with foreign delegations traveling down. And always when they come down, they usually they can talk to the detainee for any length of time they want. Any length of time they want. Typically, the conversation goes about 30 minutes. And it goes something like, do you want to come? Do you want to leave Guantanamo? And the answer is yes, and that's about the extent of it. Then they will typically, the foreign delegation will typically talk to my doctors. They will talk sometimes to the guard personnel and just ask, how's this guy behave? What's his, life, whatever. And then they leave, and we eventually typically get word that the country will take them, and then we work that. That's where really I take over and execute the transfer. There was some reporting about medical records. We've never had a foreign delegation, ask for the full medical record. They're always, always, always satisfied with the summary we give them. In one case that I recently read misreported, not the reporter's fault, by the way, the individual in question, his medical record is at least 15,000 pages, all of which would have to be redacted by every government agency and intelligence agency in the United States. That would take 2 years. I just thought it was a better idea to transfer the guy than to hold him there for 2 years unnecessarily. We've never been asked. They've never complained about the congressional or the foreign delegation access. And of course, I welcome the press, and I welcome the congressional delegations, and they come down frequently. Did that answer it? Jennifer. Sorry.
Sir, there was a report in the Wall Street Journal today about a Hellfire missile that was delivered to Cuba, and it's been considered. Really? Yeah, it's been considered. It was.
Are we blaming the post office for that, or?
It was mislabeled. Yeah. No, it was sent to a NATO exercise in Rota, Spain, in 2014, and somehow it wound its way through Europe and made its way into Cuba. Obviously, from your response, you're not familiar with it, but I was going to ask you, do you know where that missile is right now, and are you...
No, I do. Yeah. And since you bring up Cuba, we look forward to, increasing our relationship with Cuba, but for right now, and certainly for the last, 50 years, we've had zero relationship with Cuba, with the exception of Guantanamo Bay. But I do look forward to... I will be certainly after my time, but one of the things I have provided to the State Department and I think by extension the White House, we do a lot of conferences in Southcom. That's how we do a lot of our engagements. And some of it's, I think, the kind of thing, very seldom is it about anything kinetic. It's like drug interdiction, which is typically not, when it's on the high seas, typically not kinetic. But other things like humanitarian relief or disaster relief, that kind of thing. And we've invited members of the Cuban military to come to that through the State Department. Baby steps, when USNS Comfort, the big hospital ship, when it was in Haiti, I offered to have, there's a fair number of Cuban doctors that are sprinkled around, to say the least, a lot of Cuban doctors that do this engagement. Some of them are in Port-au-Prince. We offered the Cuban government, they're not military, but offered them the opportunity to maybe come aboard Comfort and see what we do. And they took us up on it. And so we had some of their Cuban doctors from the Port-au-Prince area come on board the ship and see what we do. And then they invited my docs, military, to see what they do ashore. Baby steps like that. But I have almost I have zero involvement really with Cuba right now, the Cuban military.
And if I could just follow up, your son Robert was killed in Afghanistan in 2010. You served time in Iraq. Could we get your assessment of how the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq have been prosecuted in recent years, and what you think could have been done differently so maybe ISIS and the Taliban wouldn't be as resurgent as they are right now?
I just, I can talk Iraq. You know, I've got 3 tours there, but I'm a military man and you know, professional, and I understand how these things can be done. I think the ground commanders there, you know, as we listen to, say, JC, he talks about keeping as many troops there for as long as he can. You know, when I was in Iraq, Anbar province, there was remarkable improvement in their security forces. As you all know, the awakening started there first and kind of metastasized around the country. We are very proud of the fact that the 2 Iraqi divisions that we in Anbar province organized, trained, and equipped ended up being the best Iraqi divisions. They could operate on their own, but we always had advisors with them. I believe this war stuff is hard, and it's not for the untrained and the unadvised. And I would say that to keep sufficient numbers of intel people to provide obvious intel, advisors to critique the commanders and the NCOs after they're out on operations, not to command, but to critique, to suggest, to whisper in their ear. We know how to do this. We were doing that in Anbar province. When they moved one of those divisions down to Basra, when the 14th Division collapsed, we had advisors with them. I think it was the 8th Division, maybe the 1st. They did a superb job. And then it went to other parts. So, you know, the mentorship, the advising is what makes those things. The equipment is important, but it doesn't come close to having people that are just with them, and over time, you know, less and less involvement until you come to some steady state number of people.
So you're saying it was a mistake to pull out of Iraq?
I'm saying that there was other ways to have done it at much smaller numbers than we had there certainly at the height of the war. Tom.
Along those lines, there's been talk about maybe having Apache attack helicopters in Iraq with the Iraqi forces, and also having U.S. advisors accompanying Iraqi forces. From what you're saying, would it make sense now to have those advisors forward with Iraqi forces?
Yeah, Tom, we obviously have a whole new war over there. And oh, by the way, I should add, when Lloyd Austin was there towards the end, there was another really, really remarkable man there, American. His name was Jim Jeffries. He was our ambassador. I think he was a former Vietnam Army 82nd Airborne. They both had unbelievable influence on the Prime Minister and his team that was there at the time, obviously on the military people. And there was a lot of learning to be done, a lot of advising to be done by those 2 gentlemen and their team to the Iraqi civilian leadership, as well as to, and it was kind of like, you know, if you've ever tried to teach a youngster how to drive a bike, you know, once you take those training wheels off. When I left Iraq, the training wheels were coming off, but if you know what you do, if you're a parent teaching a kid how to drive or ride a 2-wheel bike, you're running behind them the whole time, ready to grab the seat if they start to go over. And over time, they learn how to drive the bike. And I think that's one way to look at what we could have done.
But what about today? Would it be wise to
Well, we have a new war on our hands. So I would say if we want the Iraqis to get good enough to fight this fight, I believe that we have to reinforce them in terms of not only the equipment, but as well as advisory capability, that kind of thing, Tom.
with them?
Yes. There's only one way for an advisor to advise.
I have a question,
My
too.
opinion.
I have a question. Women in combat. Of course, the Marines were against opening all-ground combat jobs to women. They were overruled by the Defense Secretary. The Marine report found that mixed-gender units were less lethal, slower, more prone to injuries than all-male units. Talk about the way ahead on this. How can they put this into effect? What concerns you in the way ahead with this?
I would just offer that I believe, given the mission of the United States Armed Forces to fight the nation's wars, I believe that every decision we make, whether it's a personnel decision, Tom, or an acquisition, a new airplane, a new whatever widget, I think every decision has to be looked through only one filter, and that is, does it make us more lethal on the battlefield? Will it result in less casualties on our side? Will it end up in less casualties on the other side? Because they're human beings too. Some of them very much deserve to be killed, but others don't. And so that's the filter. So if you look at anything we're contemplating doing, does it make us more lethal? If the answer to that is do it, or is yes, then do it. If the answer to that is no, clearly don't do it. And if the answer to that is shouldn't hurt, I would suggest that we shouldn't do it because it might hurt. So that's in my opinion. The way I think you do this is, since we're ordered to do it, is you simply do it. My greatest fear, and we see this happen a lot over the 45 years I've been in the armed forces, is right now they're saying we're not going to change any standards. There will be great pressure, whether it's 12 months from now, 4 years from now, because the question would be asked, well, we've let women into these other roles, why aren't they staying in those other roles? Why aren't they advancing as infantry persons, I guess? Why aren't they becoming, more senior? And the answer, I think, will be, if we don't change standards, it will be very, very difficult to have any numbers, any real numbers come into the infantry, or the Rangers, or the SEALs, but that's their business. So you'll have very small numbers anyways. And then the only science I know on this was not the Marine study, it was the study that the Marine Corps contracted the University of Pittsburgh, I think. The other aspect is, because of the nature of infantry combat, infantry training, and all the rest, there's a higher percentage of young women in this scientific study that got hurt, and some of them hurt forever. So I think it will be the pressure for not probably the generals that are here now, but for the generals that are to come and admirals to lower standards, because that's the only way it'll work in the way that I hear some people, particularly agenda-driven people here in Washington or in the land, the way they want it to work. So, ma'am.
Thank you, General Kelly. Carla Babb, Voice of America. Last year when you were here, you had talked about the Islamic State, how there had been about 100 Islamic State fighters going to Syria from the Caribbean and from Venezuela. Could you give us an update on the status now of those fighters and how many more have gone over? And then on Guantanamo, one of the criticisms has been how expensive the base is, and I'd like to get your opinion. Do you feel that the base is cost effective? Is it too expensive to continue running? Okay,
on the Islamic extremism, again, it goes without saying, the vast majority of the people that follow the Islamic faith are, good law-abiding folks. There are a fair amount of Muslims in what were the old English colonies down there, Jamaica and Trinidad, Tobago, a few places like that. Overwhelming, not a huge percentage of the population, but significant. There's a few very, very radical mosques, one in particular that's associated himself, the imam, with ISIS. We're not seeing huge numbers. I said 100 last year. I might say 150 this year. We know a few have been killed. We work very, very closely. Again, something that we as Americans take for granted is not only the superb military that you all report on, but the FBI and the CIA and the NSA and the tremendous law enforcement people we have inside our country. We take that for granted. Many of the countries, most of the countries in the world don't have anything approaching, and certainly none better. So the countries we work with, again, that partnership issue, we provide them, work with them, give them as much information as we can. They don't have TSA. They don't really have the same kind of things at the airports that we do in terms of checking the comings and goings of people. So we do the best we can to help them. I am more concerned, particularly now it seems like the Islamic extremists and terrorists have shifted a lot of their message, and that is, hey, rather than come here to Syria, why don't you just stay at home and do San Bernardino, or do Boston, or do Fort Hood. And My concern as the Southcom commander is they can, even just a few of these, nuts can cause an awful lot of trouble down in the Caribbean because they don't have an FBI, they don't have law enforcement like we do. And many of these countries have very, very small militaries, if they have militaries at all, and they welcome the help from the United States. But did I get that? Okay.
And then on Guantanamo.
Oh, the expense of Guantanamo. It depends on how you count the expense of Guantanamo. Guantanamo is a functioning base, has been for 100 years. I frankly, when they come up with these cost estimates of what it costs per detainee and all of that, we were never asked at Southcom. Someone else came up with the number. But I know that if you look at my Gitmo budget, something on the order of $100+ million. But that is an approximate. But you know, the facility's in place, up and running. If you keep counting the cost of the facility, which I guess you should, I mean, it's an expensive place, but that's sunk cost now. We don't, the commissions, I don't run the commissions, I support the commissions. They've got a budget too. But, you know, as a nation, you make a decision what you're going to spend your money on. And if Guantanamo, if to detain a detainee at Guantanamo costs more money than it would be if you, say, took that person to the United States, if that's the policy decision, then so be it. I don't really have an opinion on whether it's too expensive or not. I just know that you know, the money I'm given, I spend very frugally, and as I say, they're very, very well taken care of. Yes.
Thank you, General. I wanted to get your opinion on something Guantanamo related, also something that's been in the news. What did you think of the swap for Bo Bergdahl and 5 senior Taliban commanders at Guantanamo?
Yeah, it's a policy decision. You know, it was an unusual transfer in that when I got the call, see, these are all very administrative things. You know, my staff gets an order from, I mean, we interact, but ultimately we get a piece of paper from the Joint Staff to say, you know, acquire a C-17 and move 2 or 3 or 1 guy or whatever to a certain country. In this case, I got a call directly from a senior official there in the building, and it was get these guys ready to go. And having worked up here before, this transfer issue was brought up initially, and my involvement in it was the SMA for Secretary Panetta. And so this was a couple of years, it's got to be 4 or 5 years, say at least 4 years ago. And the transfer wasn't done, oddly, at that point. But I did know when they called, they gave me the 5 names. I said, "Is this the Bergdahl crowd?" And he said, "Yeah, these are the same guys." I said, "Okay." I mean, I follow orders. And I said, "Is this on the up and up?" My assumption was, that question was, am I going to get the paperwork on this? And he said, "Paperwork will be coming, but it's got to go quick." So I said, "Okay, as long as I get the paperwork afterwards." It was a dicey transfer because we had an awful lot of the press down there because there was a commissions period. So we had a lot of press down there. In fact, when the press were waiting for their airplane and the families of the 9/11 crowd and all the rest were down there, we were doing the transfer, and we never got caught. And I'm sure that anyone that was down there at the time was probably, you know, should have been paid a little more attention. But you know, no, that's a policy decision to transfer them. I know it's caused a lot of angst in a lot of areas, but here again, I don't try to slow down transfers. I facilitate transfers, and I did, by the way, get the follow-up paperwork. And when the airplane took off, we deposited them, and they're, I guess, still there being monitored in some way.
So just to follow up on Christina's question, were you concerned that it was illegal since the Congress had not been notified?
No, I didn't know if they were notified. Again, I'm not involved in that process. Now, I would never assume that anyone in this building for sure would break the law. The up and up was more in terms of, is the paperwork ready? Am I going to see? Because, you know, as you know, Jennifer, we work on procedures and SOPs and all of that kind of thing. But no, I didn't assume that anyone was, you know, kind of doing something illegal. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I'm Maria for W Radio Colombia. Soon, President Santos and Obama will be celebrating 15 years of Plan Colombia. I would like to know your balance on Plan Colombia, expectations for the future if there is a post-conflict. And one more question. President Maduro from Venezuela said that the opposition is planning an international intervention and that the United States is leading it, and he mentions you as one of them.
How did they find that out? What a leak. On Colombia, remarkable story. In the last 15 or 18 years, Colombia, remarkable story. Plan Colombia was a lot of people here in Washington and other places, if they know about it at all, think that the United States gave massive amounts of assistance and money and all of that. The Colombians really did it all themselves. We did, no doubt, provide intelligence, advice, back to the questions about advising and how long you do that for. It takes a long time. We're still there. But there were never boots on the ground in a sense that we didn't go to the field with them. Human rights training was huge. How do we change our military to be better than it is? And it was very, very good at the time. They raised money through a war tax. And frankly, the elite of that country had to, I mean, are you Colombian? Yes. I mean, your country at the time was standing on the edge of a cliff looking down into hell. And your people decided to change that. They ain't perfect, just like we're not perfect, but decided to change that. And the Congress and other people here in Washington working with them, Plan Colombia, I think 4 or 5 cents on the dollar came from the United States. All of the effort came from the Colombians. You're that close. I know it's controversial. Nothing's perfect, but you're that close to ending this war. My feeling is the process of ending this war. I remember the first time I talked to President Santos and the Minister of Defense and the military men down there 3 years ago now. My first trip was, my recollection was to Colombia. I said, look, if you think the previous 50 years of this war has been hard, the next 15 years will be more complicated because you're trying to do something that isn't done very often. You're ending an internal conflict. Once you get the piece of paper, you've got to figure out the treaty. You got to figure out what do you do with all of those young people, particularly the young FARC fighters that have been kidnapped, not recruited, from their villages. Young kids at 12 and 13 years old. What do you do with them after they've been fighters? And that's all they've known. And many of them don't know what village they came from. You need to train them. Just like as you downsize your military, a GI Bill kind of thing, you need to train them. In fact, I use the term a GI Bill for the FARC. Because if you don't, then all they'll do is stay in the drug business, because the FARC is up to here in drugs. And they'll just turn into another Bakrim. It's going to be hard, and I hope my country, and I've been vocal about this, maybe too vocal, but I think people understand on the Hill, that's where I've pitched this more than anywhere else, that let's not throw success away. We have to stand and continue Plan Colombia, in my opinion, for another 10 years. It gets smaller and smaller and smaller, but we still have, and again, it's not a big money thing, it's more involvement in the process. And I think, with all due, I mean, I hope I'm not out of line to suggest something to the Colombian people, and that is the peace dividend is not going to be immediate. It will be there, but it's not going to be immediate. And the idea that once the peace treaty is over, then everyone, the lambs lie down with the lions, it's not going to happen. Maduro. As I've oftentimes said, I spend about 40 seconds a day contemplating the situation in Venezuela, and that's in prayer for the Venezuelan people. Any people at this time deserve better than what many people in Venezuela have. It's a democracy. We just saw a great election. That democracy is getting stronger, but I can tell you there is no plan of any kind that I know of to do anything but leave the Venezuelan problem to the Venezuelan people.
Thank you, General. First of all, Happy New Year.
Hey.
Two questions. So one, going back to Gotmo. Do you believe that some of those detainees were released in the past and they had joined the fight on the streets, and right now we have ISIL and ISIS? You think their expertise may have inspired or inspiring these ISIS and young people because of their release now, and there is no they are freely wandering in those countries wherever they were released?
Well, I can only use the same numbers I hear you all report. I don't think there's any definitive number. Some percentage, you hear as high as 30%, sometimes you hear less. I suppose it depends what your agenda is, that a certain percentage of them have returned to the fight. So be it. I don't know. I don't have any specific knowledge of that other than what you know, we all know some number of them have returned to the fight. As far as Gitmo, did you ask, well, Gitmo somehow instigating ISIL, right? There's absolutely no, in my opinion. And again, honest men and women can disagree on everything. I don't know of any, you know, Gitmo is Gitmo. And the one thing I do feel a little bit disappointed about is the fact that there's a lot of things that have happened in the war on terror, or whatever we're calling it today. But I'm a little bit disappointed sometimes that the role of my troops at Gitmo is oftentimes joined to maybe things that happened in other places, negative things that happened in other places. I would just tell you I'm very proud of what they do down there. And I wish I sometimes am the only person making that point. And sometimes I wish other people would make the point.
And second, sir, unrelated question. As far as the future of security in Afghanistan, what do you think now? Where do we stand in the future as far as war on terrorism concerned and all these ISIS or also the Al-Qaeda and among others?
Yeah, I mean, I don't believe that we can allow the Islamic extremists to have, which is, I believe, a small percentage of people who follow that great religion. I don't believe we can afford to let them have a safe haven. And so I believe, I mean, we know how to do these things. Some of the recommendations might be distasteful or out of the box in terms of some of the policymakers' thinking, but if you take the point that we can't let them have safe haven, then you have to do social, economic, military action, political action to prevent that. This is hard. This is really hard. And we know how to do it, but it generally translates to more expensive and longer term than what maybe the nation hopes for. Yes, ma'am.
John Kelly, I believe that you're the most senior Gold Star father in uniform. And I just wanted to ask, do you believe, U.S. Gold Star families are adequately supported? Is there anything that you'd like to see the nation do or continue to do for them? And following your retirement, what is your planned involvement in that community?
Yeah. Well, I think, one of the things about losing any child, and you can't imagine until it happens, and I hope to God it never does for you or anyone. And it doesn't matter how they die. To lose a child is I can't imagine anything worse than that. I used to think when I go to all of my trips up to Bethesda, Walter Reed, I'll go to the funerals with the Secretaries of Defense, that I could somehow imagine what it would be like. Or when I would send young people back from Iraq that died under my command, to somehow try, as you write those letters, to try to somehow sympathize. And I lost a father, I lost a mother, so you kind of think it's something like that, but it's not. It's nothing like that. And so as a person that's lost a child in combat, and the strong one in all of this is my wife, Karen, and my two kids. But when you lose one in combat, there's in my opinion, there's a pride that goes with it, that he didn't have to be there doing what he was doing. He wanted to be there. He volunteered. Generally speaking, there's no encouragement in our society today to serve the nation, but many, many, many people do in uniform, as in the military, as well as police officers and CIA and FBI. So I think they're special people, but they were doing what they wanted to do. And they were with who they wanted to be with when they lost their lives. But I can tell you it is the most, it caught me by surprise, the level of emotional impact. And every single day it continues that. So Gold Star families are special, to say the least. I'm not, they are. They don't ask for much. I get occasional letters from Gold Star families who are asking, was it worth it? And I always go back with this. It doesn't matter. That's not our question to ask as parents. That young person thought it was worth it, and that's the only opinion that counts. They don't ask for anything, as I say. I think the one thing they would ask is that the cause for which their son or daughter fell be carried through to a successful end, whatever that means, as opposed to this is getting too costly or too much of a pain in the ass, and let's just walk away from it. Because that's when they start thinking it might have been not worth it. One more question, maybe? Of course.
Well, just following up on that narrative, I mean, you know, seeing what's going on in Sangin right now, does that give you just pangs of frustration or anger, you and your wife and your family and your kids to?
Not my question. It's his. He answered it.
And I actually wanted to ask about Gitmo. What is, I know, keeping in mind that every transfer is going to be different, is there a general amount of time between when a foreign government acknowledges that they'll accept a detainee and when they're actually transferred? What is the general time frame for that?
It's pretty quick. I mean, I couldn't put a number on it. When I first got to the job, there weren't nearly as many foreign delegations. They seem to be fairly common now. But I think, and I have no idea what these countries are offered to take these guys, and zero idea. Never asked a question, none of my business. So when they come, they're all coming. I think they're just going through the motion. I think they've already decided whatever the deal, if there is a deal, and they come. I think it might be, particularly the Western countries, it might be that they can then sell it to their own population. That, no, we went to Gitmo, we met with the guy, he seemed you know, honest and that he'd be willing to be a good boy. But it's pretty quick. But I don't think they come there and then make up their mind. I think they come there to get the check. And as I say, they always talk to at least the docs and usually to my senior confinement guy, if you will, the colonel, to find out about behavior and all that kind of thing. And frankly, the vast majority of them are very compliant and kind of waiting. But no, there's no real. It's pretty quick.
Now that there's going to be a couple more transferred before you even change of command, I mean, looking back, were there any that, as you sort of put them on the plane, since you're in charge of sending them to these other countries, were there any that you kind of looked at and went, well, this isn't going to end well? I mean, that you sort of had heartburn as you put them on the plane, that you thought it was not a good idea to transfer them?
Well, I mean, they're all bad boys. We have dossiers on all of them. Some of them were more effective in being bad boys than others. You know, I think we can all quibble on whether 13 or 12 or 8 years in detention is enough to have them having paid for their whatever they did. But they're bad guys. I think someone asked a question about the Taliban Five or the Fab Five. They were pretty senior guys. I mean, I was really happy to see that their year of restriction was extended, and obviously the White House, I mean, the administration fought hard for that, and the receiving country were allowed that to happen. I read the same stories that, well, frankly, you guys write about, well, they're on the phone and they're doing their thing. I don't know anything about that, but these are pretty senior guys. But at Gitmo, they were just, you know, as senior guys, they were kind of not very difficult to deal with. So there's a few down there I'd like to punt because they are pains in the neck, and but the vast majority of them are pretty, right now, pretty easy to work with. When I took the job, there were 166. I think it was reported. If not, you can get scooped right now. We got one to Kuwait today, 2 yesterday or the day before to Ghana. You all know there's more coming this month. But you know, no, I mean, if they go back to the fight, we'll probably kill them. So that's a good thing. So I want to end with that. I guess I should end with that. And just say, really and truly, I know some of you fairly well. Some of you don't know at all, but it has been a pleasure getting to know the Pentagon Press Corps. I think you don't need this from me, but I think it's a very responsible group of men and women. And you always try to write the most accurate story you can, and that's what it's all about, I think. So as I say, I will go over the side now and probably never talk to a press corps of any kind again, but I wish you all well, and please, please, please remember, what my troops do at Gitmo is a mission that their president has given them. They do it honorably, they do it decently, and until those guys are transferred, until that facility is closed, those men will be taken care of in exactly the way I've been told to take care of them. So thanks very much, I appreciate it.
Happy New Year.